The enclosed garden represents Mary's Immaculate Conception. A paradise blossoming behind walls, it was one of the most important symbols of the Virgin. On her blue cloak, she wears a costly pearl brooch, on which we see the image of a unicorn. According to early natural histories, the unicorn will only allow itself to be caught when it comes to lay its head in the lap of the Virgin. In Lochner's painting, the religious symbols are intertwined in a charming and secretive fashion. At the top of the painting, the bearded head of God the Father forms the apex of a triangle, representing the Holy Trinity. Christ sits in Mary's lap. And the Holy Ghost, symbolized by the white dove, is sent down from heaven. The iconographical richness of the picture emphasizes the artist's depth of learning. The Madonna in the garden is a picture type first developed in northern Italy. It soon spread upwards as far along the Rhine as Cologne, where Lochner was the leading master of his times. A comparable picture by the North Italian painter Stefano da Zevio from about 1410 shows a rose garden with the Madonna surrounded by angels. Lochner's picture, produced some 40 years later, shows how profoundly the theme could be developed. While da Zevio's panel is essentially an ornamental object, Lochner's work is a harmonious intertwining of subject, content, and form. This small, richly colored holy garden, painted by an early 15th century artist from the Upper Rhine, shows Mary reading, the Christ child playing, and the two of them surrounded by angels and saints. The emphasis is on the symbolism of the picture, not on its overall harmony. Even in the circle of Stefan Lochner, artists focused on the narrative, as in this triptych, also in the Wallraf-Richartz Museum. But Lochner's picture has many forerunners, especially in Cologne painting from 1400 onwards. As we see in this small panel of the Madonna and Child in a meadow, again from the Wallraf-Richartz Museum. And in another small panel, Mary in the Garden of Paradise, where Christ is seen teaching heavenly music to the angels. But Lochner's devotional image is matchless in the sensitivity of its painterly effects, the new naturalism that he brought to early German art. It is seen in the painting of the drapery, and particularly in the treatment of Mary's gorgeous blue robe, which the artist has fashioned out of lapis lazuli, a pigment usually reserved for the Virgin, and worth twice the weight of gold in Lochner's time. This harmonious marriage of a complex iconography and delicate naturalism could only have been achieved by an experienced master in his prime. And it seems that the Madonna of the Rose Bower is the last surviving work by Stefan Lochner. In 1968, a photo taken in Vietnam by Edward T. Adams, showing the brutal assassination of a defenseless Viet Cong soldier, aroused an outcry in the international press. Adams' photograph brought home to millions around the world the true horror of Vietnam. The artist, Vostell, took this famous war photograph and combined it with an image of a dancing beauty queen. Vostell called his picture Miss America. In the middle of the picture, we can just about read a few scattered words. Dancing lights, sequins sparkled. It's a review of a fashion show. Vostell has juxtaposed two very different worlds, the brutal reality of Vietnam and the fake tinsel dream of a beauty contest. We are looking at two sides of America, what lies on top and what lies underneath. The public mask and the private face. The victims are powerless. An invisible hand pulls the trigger. Like the assassinated Viet Cong soldier, the beauty queen has no real control over her destiny. She hangs disjointedly at the top of the picture, like a dangling puppet. She too is on public display. Usually it's the soldier in front of the firing squad who is blindfolded. Vostell, in a deliberate reversal, switches the roles around. It's his American beauty queen who wears the mask of blood. The pin-up beauty queen and the assassinated soldier have something else in common. Both are for sale. Edward Adams' photograph was in demand for newspapers all over the world. It was an expensive and highly successful commercial product, discussed and studied across the breakfast table, like the results of the Miss World competition. Miss America once had a smiling and successful face. Vostell obliterates her eyes with a bloody smear. Ideally, Vostell said, my pictures should be seen as harassing fire, warnings, threats, protests, reminders, and question marks. His materials are drawn from the same trashy world of magazines and newspapers, television sets and advertisements, posters and packaging, as the materials of his contemporaries, the American pop artists. But where their art celebrates the consumer culture of the 60s, Vostell's seems to tear it into grubby fragments. What the American pop artists praise, Vostell questions. What they cheer, he destroys. The destruction includes the traditional image of the artist. Vostell was a pioneer of happenings and action art. He brought his work out of the galleries and into the street. Life and people, he said, are art. Images torn or destroyed. The pieces thrown together in new combinations. These are typical characteristics of his work. Vostell was born in Leverkusen in 1936. The first artistic training he received was in printing and lithography. In 1954, while still a student at art school in Wuppertal, he discovered a technique which became central to his work. He called it décollage, a French word meaning to tear off, to unglue, to scratch away. Décollage is the opposite of collage. In Vostell's hands, the act of tearing, of unsticking, of removing to reveal what was underneath became not just a technique, it was also a way of thinking. My art, said Vostell, intends to shock the average German consumer. Coca-Cola, from 1961, was made using this décollage method. It is an image of instability and disorder. The artist has torn off the surface of the poster to reveal other surfaces, other products, other eras hidden below. The Coca-Cola poster has been vandalized, its message challenged. In Vostell's art, the beautiful and the brutal are involved in a head-on crash. Art is only possible, he said, if we recognize death. The artists I admire have created in their works an alternative world to the world of death. I'm not thinking here of death as an image, like the dance of death, but rather as an awareness of the instability of the passing second. But painting is a medicine, a means of fighting the principle of death, an image of opposition. Death must be grasped in terms of its reality in time. Otherwise, all artists would say, let's have a break for a few hundred years. I'd much rather just do nothing for 1,000 years, just study, and only then start painting again. We must have something to motivate our inner urge to create. Turning to his subject matter, Vostell wrote, in 1962, sex and war started to emerge as opposites in my scrubbed-out pictures. I'm a realist, but one who creates his own reality through a new realist technique. Technique is always the main thing in my work, while the subject matter, the idea or the combination of two contradictory forces like love and death, is its universal element. Vostell soon realized that his décollage technique drew attention to the physical act of making a work, to the tearing and ripping off of paper. He quickly moved on to staging happenings in the streets and making his installations outdoors, blurring the division between the artistic performance and the political demonstration. In 1962, with Georges Macunius, Vostell founded Fluxus, the most radical and experimental art movement of the 60s. They organized performance events, musical events, published actionist texts, and mixed video installations with loud public disturbances. In Vostell's work, images, objects, and happenings always seem to be piled one on top of another. Miss America takes its features from a gruesome happening for performers and 3 TV cameras mounted 1967 on a rifle range at Cologne. The happening was called Miss Vietnam. Writing about his technique, Vostell remembered, in 1961, I worked for a few hours a day as a layout artist. I had to deal with 300 photos at once. I became impressed with the ease of wiping out, of obliterating, what the French call effacage. But my work of this kind was not like Gerhard Richter's, whose painted photographs distort the image, but do not wipe it out. They are blurred images in oil, in effect, painted, blurred photographs. In about 1962 or 63 in Cologne, I discovered the technique of using photo emulsion on treated canvas. I'm probably the first artist to have worked on photo canvas. Onto the emulsion on the canvas, I transferred what you see in the illustrated magazines, and then treated the images with special photo acids. Naturally, there are certain side effects. The acid oxidizes on the canvas, and they change over a period of time. Miss America is thus a changing document of our time that seems to grow in power. Berlin, 1913. A busy street in a big city. Having put on their lipstick and high heels, the city's tarts are out window shopping. The scene has been splashed onto the canvas with quick, nervous brushstrokes. The spectator has been transformed into a voyeur. Between 1913 and 1915, Ernst Ludwig Kirchner painted a series of such street scenes. This one was the first. 5 women saunter along the pavement. To the left, a car rushes past. On the other side of the pavement, a shop window, which the passing tarts inspect. Like everything else in the picture, the window has been created with a few rapid brushstrokes, as if the painter is in a terrible hurry to record what he has seen. Their fashionable get-up, pointed stiletto heels, flashy furs, warlike feathers in their hats, exaggeratedly streamlined coats, gives the five figures a grotesque air.